once said that she had the greatest horror of having children and would rather have none. Princess Victoria, better known as Vicky, was born just over 9 months after Victoria and Albert were married. Over the course of the next 17 years, Victoria gave birth to 9 children, and all of them survived adulthood, which was unusual for the time. Even more interesting, given the number of children that she had, Victoria really didn't like babies. She's quoted as saying, "An ugly baby is a very nasty object. The prettiest are frightful when undressed, as long as they have their big body and little limbs and that terrible frog-like action." Well, I'm sorry, Victoria, but I personally find that frog-like action to be absolutely adorable. It's pretty likely that if Victoria was a mother today, she would be diagnosed with postnatal depression. She warned her daughter about aloneness and a tendency to cry. She said, "It is what every lady suffers with, more or less, and what I, during my first confinement, suffered dreadfully with." It's also important to note that after the birth of Bertie, her second child, Queen Victoria even reported hallucinations and felt like she was losing her mind. I'm wondering if maybe this was postpartum psychosis. It certainly sounds as though she would have benefited from some of our modern day support for mental health, doesn't it? In her later years, Victoria even referred to pregnancy and maternity period as an unhappy condition and described it as the shadow side of life. Now, I think many of us who have experienced traumatic birth and breastfeeding journeys might relate to these feelings, but I am hopeful that as we now have better care and understanding, that perhaps we're a little bit less scarred than Victoria seems to have been. As well as really not liking parenting in general or pregnancy, Victoria was also very, very negative about breastfeeding. She called it a ruin to intelligent young women. And she even wrote in her diary when she discovered that her own daughters had chosen to breastfeed, "It makes my hair stand on end that my daughters have turned into cows." And she went on to name one of the cows in her dairy after her daughter Alice, apparently for daring to breastfeed. I think that says a lot, doesn't it? Queen Victoria's sentiments did actually reflect general attitudes among the upper classes at the time. Upper class women considered breastfeeding to be something that the lower classes did. In her parenting book, The Way They Should Go, the author Jane Ellen Panton says, "I myself know of no greater misery than nursing a child. Let no mother condemn herself to be a common or ordinary cow, unless she has a real desire to nurse." I can definitely get on board with the message that you should only breastfeed if it's your choice to do so. But at the time, if you couldn't source a wet nurse for your baby and you weren't breastfeeding, the chances were sadly very high that your infant wouldn't live to even be 12 months old. Regardless of the views of Victoria and her upper class peers, breastfeeding rates were of course high throughout the 1800s through necessity. And in fact, many people did consider it to be an essential duty for mothers to nurse their own children. When I look back on the Victorian era, I feel really sad that Victoria may have had a more positive view on babies and parenting if she'd had access and to modern day mental health awareness around the perinatal period. But I'm also intrigued because it seems that this era did mark a bit of a turning point when it comes to being able to have a discussion around choice in infant feeding. And of course, that's a topic that has been top of mind for several generations now. Anyway, what are your thoughts about Victoria's opinions? Let's talk some more in the comments.